Hello, everyone. I'm Eric D'Souza, and joining me today is Sylvia Maultash Warsh. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good too. Sylvia is continuing our interviews of the crime writers of Canada who have been shortlisted for the Awards of Excellence of 2023. Just a little bit about her. She is the daughter of Holocaust survivors and was born in Germany and came to Canada and settled in Toronto at the age of 4. Sylvia writes the Dr. Rebecca Temple Mystery Series, the first book in this series, To Die in Spring, set in Toronto of 1979, was on the shortlist for the Arthur Ellis Award. Find Me Again, the second in the series, won the Edgar Award and was nominated for 2 categories for an Anthony Edward. The third book in the series, Seasons of Iron, was nominated for the Real Lit Award. Her short stories have appeared in many anthologies. If I counted right, 6 of her stories were nominated for Derringers and Authors. In 2021, Days Without a Name, published by Grave Diagnosed, was shortlisted for the Best Crime Short Story, sponsored by Mystery Magazine, and she's been nominated again this year for Best Short Story for, this time, The Natural Order of Things, published in Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine. Sylvia, you told me that The Natural Order of Things was a rewrite of another story that had been rejected earlier. What about the earlier version of that story made you want to stick with it and give it a second shot?
I really liked the atmosphere of the story. It's set at a cottage, which happens to be our cottage, so I know the layout. But it's set at a cottage. Well, ours is on Georgian Bay, so it's on a lake. And everything is wonderful. It's July, but this is all lost on the protagonist, who is a single male. He's divorced, so he has no girlfriend or anything, and he's kind of bummed out because he's turning 42 at this cottage. And I like that. That was the same in both versions. Also, in both versions, he meets a woman up there, a very unique woman. I won't go into that, but there are problems. He falls for her, but she's married, so she has a husband, so it's not ideal. And there was, it was the setting with the water and the swimming, and this very strange woman who he meets. But it was a very low key kind of story. Like you said, it was rejected from an anthology, and I sort of lay it aside. I didn't know what to do with it, so it was lying fallow for a bit. And then one day I heard this interview on CBC. I loved listening to their interviews especially with scientists and experts and so forth. So they were interviewing an entomologist, a bug expert. And it was just such a horrible thing he was describing that my ears kind of perked up. And and he was describing a praying mantis. And the praying mantis, the claim to fame of the female praying mantis is that after she mates with the male of the species, she bites his head off. And she eats it. So I thought, gee, this is horrible. Maybe I can use it. Now, it turns out that the reason, well, I don't know if it's the reason, but it's a survival benefit for her to eat this head because it's protein. And she actually lays more eggs after this horrible thing. But anyway, that didn't make it into the story. But as soon as I heard that, I thought, oh, I've got to use this. And somehow the two conflated. My story that was too low key. I ended up using the praying mantis as kind of a theme in the story, and then my protagonist changed. I mean, I can't even remember what his occupation was in the original, but now he was a teacher of science who was writing a kid's book on killer bugs. So he'd already written a book on the assassin bug, which was horrible. I won't go into that, but his publisher liked it, and he's now writing a book on the praying mantis. So that just completely changed the whole story, and it turned out to be much better than the original. And I was quite happy with it.
Yeah, it turned out that I guess the hard work paid off. And it's interesting, I guess, how the creative mind works. That we can sort of shelve a story, but it's never dead to a writer. It just, I don't know, percolates and waits for that seed to give it an extra
Yeah,
spark.
yeah. That often happens with me, that I shelve something and I don't know what to do with it, and then just something comes up, some weird, something on the radio, or I read something in the paper, and that just sparks something, some kind of an idea. So that was fun. You say it was hard work, but I enjoyed every minute.
Yeah, I find that even with novels, a lot of times you have to have faith in yourself. So I'm imagining you have a lot of faith in your skills, that sometimes you start a project, and you don't know how it's going to finish, but you still have to start it, right? You still have to have that faith.
Yeah. I mean, I have a certain amount of faith, but I have problems. I mean, I'm fine with the writing. It's the ideas sometimes of where to go with things. I realized recently, when I was trying to write, I was trying to think about a story that I wanted to write, and I had a wonderful character in mind. And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I realized I don't have a story. I have this character, but I don't know what to do with it. So I realize now that in many of my stories, I actually start with the germ of a story, a germ of idea of what's going to happen. And then I find a character that will work with that story.
That'll fit. Well, you were telling me about sort of the process of your current project, that it sort of has evolved in many ways. So you told me that it was an historical novel with some speculative elements, but it evolved, or it's continuing to evolve, and now it's an historical speculative novel that could be YA. I'm wondering how that process is coming along. And when you change it to YA, did you have to rewrite the whole thing?
I didn't change anything, actually. I think I showed it to an editor a while back, and she suggested that I market it as a YA because my protagonist is a 15-year-old boy.
Mhm.
So there's no overt sex or violence. So I really didn't change anything, and I'm still a little bit unsure about that because I haven't started to send it out to publishers yet. So I don't know what the reception is going to be. I'm going to have to feel my way through that. Um, but it is, told from the point of view of a 15-year-old. But he's a mature 15-year-old. He's growing up in 1840, in the 1800s, and my story is set in 1844, specifically in Washington, D.C. So he's had a lot of things thrown at him. His father, before the story opens, his father has already died. He's actually hung himself out of shame because he stole money from a client. He was a lawyer, and this client was an orphanage. So it was a horrible thing. And so this is sort of the backstory. And then 6 months after that, his mother is found drowned in the Potomac, because it's Washington, D.C. And the police think it's suicide, but he doesn't think so. He thinks his mother was murdered. So after that, he becomes very ill. He's desperately ill, and he nearly dies. But he is saved by a doctor who has concocted this medicine that he has developed from a plant in the Amazon. So he saves, my protagonist's name is Samuel. So he saves Samuel's life. Now, the speculative part comes in because there are side effects to this treatment. And the main side effect is that Samuel's senses are heightened to an nth degree, sort of like he can hear mice beneath the ground, for instance. But the most fun part of the side effect is that he can get images of what animals are thinking in his, like, they're images, they're not words, but he can see images in his mind of what an animal, of what is in an animal's mind. So it's basic, sort of a really basic communication with an animal. And he can convey something of what he's thinking to the animal. So, so I wanted it to be based a little bit in reality. I didn't want it to be completely magic or anything. So that's henceforth this plant from the Amazon. And because he doesn't believe his mother committed suicide, he investigates what he thinks happened to her, and he is helped by some of this communication with animals.
It definitely sounds like something my teenage boys would want to read, especially the animal connection.
Yeah.
Oh, they love it when animals are
Okay.
involved.
That's my favorite part too. Yeah.
I guess a little bit of a backtrack, and we sort of skimmed over your bio that you won an Edgar for your second novel, Find Me Again. What was that like?
Oh, that was probably one of the most exciting things that have happened to me. My husband and daughter and an old friend decided to drive to New York for the banquet. We were invited to the banquet, and there was a reception before the banquet where nominees were invited. So that was fun. I think I ended up speaking to a judge that picked my book. I didn't realize it until later, but anyway. So then this banquet, it was so huge. It was Mystery Writers of America. I don't even know how many members they have, but you couldn't see from one end of the hall to the next. It was just awe-inspiring. And nobody thought my book was going to win. There was a Canadian contingent there, and I met a few of the other shortlisted people. And there was one guy who everyone thought was going to win. He had written, I think, a series of thrillers, and I don't remember his name because I didn't know him at the time. And everyone just agreed, yes, he's probably going to win. So anyway, so they started, going through the announcements of the nominees, and they gave out a few awards, and they finally got to my category, which was Best Paperback Original. And so I was terrified. I just sat there, surrounded by these million people, and they read out my name. And I just sat there, like I think I was just, I don't know, in a dream. I was shocked. I don't know. So my daughter nudged me and said, "You won, get up." It's you. So it was just crazy. I was so nervous. And so, I had a very short speech because of course I didn't think I was going to win. And I got up there, and there was a sea of people. And afterwards, even there was this was kind of exciting too. There was a very small Asian man waiting for me in the wings, and he was a Japanese publisher. And he offered he wanted rights to my book to translate it into Japanese, which happened.
Wow.
So that's exciting, right? Like almost immediately after. But then afterwards, there was a Canadian bookseller, a Toronto bookseller, who had also made the trip to New York, Al Navis. You wouldn't be familiar with him. He's gone now. He was a little bit elderly even at the time, but he was so funny. He came up to me, and I guess I didn't look suitably enthusiastic, but he said, "You don't understand how big this is." He said, "They're going to write this on your tombstone." And I thought, okay, thanks, pal. So I never forgot that.
Yes, I mean, I would agree with him. That's an excellent merit. But we were also talking a little bit about, I guess, rewarding work. And one thing you do right now is you teach creative writing to seniors. You got through the pandemic, or as you say, took a little break during the pandemic, but it started again. That must be a rewarding task. I'm sure there's a lot of want-to-be authors who are taking their first steps that you're helping them.
There were. I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years. I can't believe how long. I mean, I started in the 90s. I was a child. I was very young. I teach once a week. It's like a workshop group. And in the 90s, interestingly enough, it was that time period, there were a number of Holocaust survivors in my classes. And it was quite an education, listening to their stories and reading them. They were awe-inspiring. Everything they had gone through. The oddest thing that I remember about that is that with everything that they'd been through, they had great senses of humor. They laughed and they told funny stories and jokes. And it was just, I was just sort of sitting there listening to all of them, and it was just wonderful. I got to know about their lives. I got to know not just about the horrors of what they've been through, but I got to know about their families. And you really get to, once you hear people write about their families and you know, the experiences they've been through, you really get to know them. I just, it was very rewarding. It's very rewarding. Now, lately, even before the pandemic, the seniors tend to be a little bit younger, maybe in their 60s and 70s, you know, and a lot of them are really good writers. We do everything, you know, whatever they want to bring, they can read out. And now I insist on them bringing copies for people, because then other people can actually give them some feedback. But some of them write personal experience stories. Some of them are writing poetry. A small number, a surprisingly small number, write fiction. But right now I have a student he's just a born fiction writer, even though he was, you know, he had his occupations, his job. He's retired now, but he's like, he brings a new story almost every week, and he's getting them published.
Wow.
And I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. He's probably got like a half a dozen credits at least of stories that he's published. And I'm just sort of helping him along with his craft. But really, he's got such good instincts in fiction. So you never know who you're going to get in your class. It's really fun.
It's interesting. It sounds like maybe you're mentoring your future competition, though.
Well, like I said, very few of them really end up writing fiction. They tend to want to write their own stories. You know, fiction is a very unique kind of thing to write, and not everybody can do it. So no, I'm not I'm not worried. Actually, this particular writer loves short stories, but he doesn't think he can write a novel. So I think I'm safe.
Excellent. Well, I'll let you get back to your historical speculative fiction writing. I know that's a monumental task for you. It was a pleasure finally talking to you, Sylvia.
Pleasure's all mine.
Hopefully we'll do it again.
Good. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
And lastly, good luck.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you for everyone watching.